Okay, so hey guys, and welcome back to another Axel 72 video, and in today's video I'm going to be giving my prediction for the Lerone Murphy versus Movsar Evloev fight. And so if you are new around here and you haven't yet subscribed, please do so, like the video if you do indeed like the video, and feel free to join the Patreon as well. You can request any kind of combat sporting related content, including MMA content, and I will try my best to get out there for you guys. I appreciate all the support which I've had with it so far, and of course the link will be in the description. Let's get straight into this one, and this is the matchup that really has to happen with the two top contenders in the featherweight division. Obviously, we've had the whole thing with Volk Lopez too, where one of these two fighters should have been given the chance to fight Volk instead of Lopez again, but I mean, at least Volk won and didn't retire, so I suppose, for whoever wins this, it's still an opportunity next in line for them to get a fight at the title and to also fight a legend like Volk. I mean, I was disappointed before with the whole kind of Volk Lopez thing, because if Lopez had beaten Volk, I'm sure Volk would have retired. And to be fair, I was hearing murmurs about Volk retiring if he'd won either way. I'm kind of glad that Volk went out there, won very well, and then didn't retire, because again, like I say, he's just such a great name to have, and both Murphy and Evloev have done enough to deserve getting a title shot. So, for them to have not had that opportunity to fight a legend like Volkanovski, the best featherweight of all time, in my opinion, I think it would have just been, like I say, quite harsh to them. And it's a great name to have on your resume, even if you lose. Of course, Lopez's stock has risen a lot from the losses against Volk. But like I mentioned, this is a fight that has had to make sense. Like I mentioned, the two top contenders in the division. I'm glad it's happening. I was still hearing murmurs even now about possible things to not make this fight happen, but I'll talk about that in a minute. But Murphy, he's really made it clear that he has a good claim for the belt, and that was kind of mainly after that last win of his, taking a fight on short notice against an unranked fighter in Aaron Pico, where he really didn't need to take that fight, and he really went out there and stopped the hype for Aaron Pico. I mean, Pico was coming into the UFC with a big kind of background in other organizations, PFL and Bellator, and there was a real hype behind him, like there was for Patchy Mix and, fighters like that. And of course, Murphy went out there and KO'd him clean with a spinning back elbow in round one. And again, he was coming in on 3 weeks' notice. So, that just didn't need to happen at all, him to do that. He was in a good spot ranked at the moment. He could have just had this fight with Evloev instead, and then he would have been given, the fight with Volk. And, instead he's really, like I say, staked a claim for himself to get that title shot. And everybody was really pushing for him to get that title shot over Lopez a second time, and even over Evloev as well. So I think, it really shows how taking them chances in the UFC, sometimes you can reap the rewards and sometimes you might not, but the risk is there, and if you're willing to take it, it shows a lot about your character. And that Murphy was willing to take it, and he was able to go out there and thrive in the pressure, and like I say, with a risky fight as well. And when we've seen the lack of activity from Evloev, this of course excited fans more, and was just so unexpected, as well as Murphy was starting to make himself kind of known a bit more as a decision fighter, and now he gets the chance to instead main event in a fight which is probably, definitely his most hyped by far. Like I say, coming off a great win for himself, the English fans are now starting to get to know him a bit more and kind of acknowledge him. When we had the likes of Tom Aspinall and Paddy Pimblett around in the UK, fighters like Murphy was kind of going under the radar a bit because he wasn't a massive talker and he didn't go out there typically and go out and get loads of stoppages. And now he's gone out there and stopped Pico, with Aspinall not really fighting at the moment because of his injury, and with Pimblett just going on to lose. Murphy's coming through as a real kind of exciting name in the UK that fans, like I say, are going to get behind. And now he's main eventing a stacked card of all good UK talent. It's really exciting and it's refreshing as well, and he's now getting this opportunity to show up in his home country. I've been hearing, though, issues, like I mentioned, about Evloev having possible visa problems, possibly making it hard for him to come over to England to fight. And I've been hearing possible rumours that Evloev might have to pull out of the card and John Silver might have to take his place. But so far, nothing's been announced and nothing's been confirmed. And I think it's going to go ahead, and I hope it's going to go ahead still with Evloev. Of course, Evloev has had multiple cancellations, especially 2 or 3 against Aaron Pico, pulling out, I think, through injury, maybe visa issues as well. But, again, he's just not fought in over a year now, since December of 2024, as a result of all these pullouts. And I think, he was right in line there to have a title shot after beating Sterling. And, he was, Volk was talking about him, everything like that was, going to happen. But now he just keeps having these pullouts and these issues and things like that. It's kind of given a hold back from the UFC from really wanting him to go out there and to become a champion, because, you don't really want another champion who, isn't a big name and isn't fighting all that much, because there's, Chimaev, at least, he's not fighting that much, but he's a big name. Evloev isn't really that big of a name, and if he goes out there to beat Volk and he's only fighting once a year and having all these problems, making matchups otherwise, it's just going to be more hassle for the UFC, and the UFC won't want to, endure that. So that's probably why they're giving him this matchup. Again, if he wins this one, there's more hype around him, because there was hype there around him after beating Sterling, because he'd had, a good run of names. But again, that hype slowed down just through inactivity and fight cancellations and all these problems that he's been having. So again, hopefully, fingers crossed, everything goes ahead with this fight. Like I mentioned, though, he's got some good names on his resume, definitely showing himself as a decision fighter, though, because, he pretty much has decision wins against any of the higher up names in which he has fought, the likes of Aljamain Sterling. That was a good competitive fight. It was a close fight, to be fair, but he just edged it. Arnold Allen as well, again, he was showing that he could deal with a striker in Allen, and also Diego Lopez as well, a striker there who can mix in wrestling in Lopez. And of course, that win kind of aged pretty well for him. Of course, Lopez going and getting 2 title shots after. And even with the inactivity, he still does hold that number 1 contender spot. And again, he does deserve this fight. And he's definitely going to be a different test for that of Murphy. Murphy, since fighting at the higher levels of the UFC, he's fought, Dan Ige, he's fought Josh Emmett, he's fought Aaron Pico, Edson Barboza as well, all kind of strikers for the most part. I mean, Ige can mix in wrestling a bit, but all kind of strikers for the most part. And so Evloev is going to be, a real test of somebody who is kind of an out-and-out wrestler, really. He's not really a tremendously big submission threat, as we've talked about. There's decisions in which he's had on his resume, but he's definitely, like I say, going to go out there and be able to wrestle and be able to scramble and to be able to create, chaos and, like I say, keep getting you down to the ground. He's got, a high takedown ratio in the featherweight division, and so he's going to probably carry that on into this fight, and so it's definitely going to be interesting to see how that plays out. To speak about both fighters individually, though, we'll start off with Movsar Evloev, and the positives about him: I think he fights against you on his back, and, he can also go for, ground positions well. If you have, or you are on his back, he can fight against you, he can work them positions, and he can still, go for good positions out of, perhaps a bad spot in which he's been put in, which was happening in the Sterling fight. And I think he was also definitely making the most of the scrambles in the Sterling fight. Any time in which there was a scramble, whether Sterling initiated it or Evloev initiated it, he was going out there and getting the better of it, and he was ending up in a better position from it, especially in the second and the third round. The first round I had him losing, but them two, like I say, he definitely made the most of them positions and that little bit more kind of progression on the ground. He goes through the positions well on the ground and the motions well on the ground. That was, again, in that last Sterling fight, he was showing a good level of wrestling ability. It wasn't just lying on top of somebody and just kind of trying to make sure that suffocating them, really, and just sitting on them. It was, actually going through the positions, going through the motions, trying to, change positions, trying to work, better spots, trying to go for the back, trying to, land damage as well, going for good ground and pound. He's got good small shot ground and pound, which he was initiating and having success with on Sterling, because Sterling wasn't really using too much ground and pound. Sterling was going more for the back. And again, it was just nice to see. It was a bit more cleaner, more refreshing style of wrestling, in which we don't see, too much at the higher levels at the moment, where fighters instead are just kind of getting you in one spot and then just, like I say, trying to keep you there. And he's not awful on the feet either. I think he does throw with power, and he's not hesitant to commit to a big shot even if it doesn't land. I don't think he's as accurate as Murphy, but again, he's not awful on the feet, but I just don't really want to see him on the feet. He catches kicks and turns them into takedowns, and I think his takedown variety is good, and that could definitely catch out Murphy because Emmett was able to take Murphy down on a few occasions and actually caught some of his kicks to then take him down. And, I could see Evloev doing that as well. And I think he improves throughout the fight. Typically, I have him as quite a slow starter. So, Murphy, if he's becoming some knockout kind of power fighter now, he might be able to actually get on the front foot for one of the kind of first times in his career in more recent times, and actually be able to do some damage in the early rounds against Evloev. And that's definitely something he needs to do, because I think Evloev, like I say, is going to grow into the fight and improve throughout it and show that wrestling cardio that he does have. Negatives about him, his head's on the line quite a lot. Again, he could be pretty well timed by Murphy if he does catch him coming in. His urgency to get out of bad spots can sometimes be a little bit lackluster. Again, in the early rounds against Sterling, he was very comfortable, possibly too comfortable, accepting himself just being pushed up against the cage. Even in the third round, the kind of early part of the third round, something that made it a bit closer was the fact that, like I say, he was just being pushed up against the cage and wasn't really looking to then transition to a better spot. When the scrambles came on the ground, he was having success, but when he was getting pushed up against the cage, he just seemed very comfortable to just kind of stay there and not really do too much. But again, I just don't really see Murphy actually going and getting him up against the cage for all that long, if at all. His speed on the feet and his hand speed in general isn't as good as that of Murphy's. Getting his punches through can sometimes be a problem. He can be a bit predictable when he does do something a bit different, because he is just on rushing with his attacks and you can see them come in and just kind of step out and move away. And I think Murphy's good movement could definitely do that. He stands tall, his hands are low when striking, again, meaning he could get timed, and he's not as comfortable coming in, and he can get caught when he's coming in on the feet. He doesn't really execute that, many submissions or really go for a tremendous amount of submission attempts. If there's one available, he'll go for it, but he just doesn't actually execute them all that often, or, like I say, really go for them all that well. He'll go through the positions and go through the motions, but he's looking kind of for submissions, but he's not actually going out there and executing them. And he can sometimes do too much on the feet as well, again, trying to mix in attack to try and surprise his opponent. But like I say, it's just on rushing and he's doing too much and he can get caught out when doing that. And Sterling in the third round caught him when he went for a spinning back elbow, which was from way too far out and he didn't need to do at all. And then he took him down and got into a more difficult spot for him to then, have to deal with being on his back. And again, I think he is just sometimes doing too much on the feet, which Murphy again could catch him when he's doing that. Murphy, as a fighter, he's got very good timing and he can catch you coming in and he can deal with that physical kind of standing in front of you type pressure. Evloev isn't really, like I say, that type of fighter to really put on a tremendous amount of pressure on the feet, but, if he goes for a takedown, he might be able to catch him out. And, Pico is definitely a different type of fighter. Pico was just there in the pocket, standing, trading, not really looking for his defense too much. Whereas, again, it'll be different with Evloev, but typically, like I say, he's got really good timing and just the way that he can fight on the back foot and move on the back foot. His movement in general is very impressive. Like I say, knowing when to come in and engage and knowing when to disengage and move off is just very nice. And he probably has got one of the best kind of on the feet movement in the UFC. And again, he can fight on the back foot well. His accuracy is very good. He can dictate the range pretty well. Typically, when he's able to dictate that range, he can have a lot of success and he can fight at a mid-range or in close. But, sometimes you don't always have that power to stop the pressure and to really be able to control the range. But again, later on in the fight, he was able to do that well against Emmett when Emmett started to slow down a little bit. He can get himself back to the feet. Typically, that is all he's trying to do when he's on the ground, and he can do it pretty well. It'd be interesting to see how well he'll be able to do it against Evloev. He's faster, in my opinion. He's got typically a good high guard to catch any kind of wild punches in which Evloev might throw. He's got a good jab as well, which again could catch Evloev out with the minimal head movements he has. He's got good feints as well, and he's got good striking variety. Again, mixing in the kicks with the elbows, mixing up the elbows in which he throws with the punches and the jabs. It's very impressive the variety of elbows he throws. He chopped through Emmett's kind of nose really with a nice kind of chopping elbow, but then again you can see him throwing that back elbow as well where he knocked out Pico. So again, it's just good variety there. Negatives about him, again, like I say, normally doesn't have the power to stop that physical kind of on the feet pressure. But again, we've seen that he can do that now. And again, like I say, don't feel like Evloev is going to be putting on that much pressure. He can accept that back foot position. He can not often be able to actually get himself off the cage all too well, too consistently. He can, just have times where he is being backed up against the cage and being pushed up there, which again is what was happening to Evloev in his last fight, but Evloev might be able to flip that and do that to Murphy in this one. He doesn't really have any chance of going and getting a submission attempt or really using his submission attempts. You'll sometimes see him go for like a guillotine or something like that, but it just doesn't ever really seem like it has a chance of actually working. And then again, he just doesn't really do it that often either. His takedown defense, I don't think is the best. Like I say, he was getting taken down quite often against Josh Emmett, and that's not really a good look, really, to see that happen in the third or the fourth round. That happened. He got taken down 3 times in a round, I think. And again, that's not really the best look when you've not really fought a wrestler so far. And Emmett's never really been known for being a good wrestler. He doesn't really work too much in the clinch, and he can have strikes caught, like I say, causing him to then go down. Again, getting caught with the leg kicks, causing him to then go down, and he doesn't really try and prevent that from happening. Again, when we saw, for example, Adesanya at his best, when he was throwing these creative kicks, there were times in which they were getting caught, but he was really, going out there, and even if he just had one leg, he was still trying to fight the takedown. Whereas Murphy doesn't really do that. He does accept that position a bit more, and he hasn't had to deal with that kind of constant ground pressure, like I say, at a high level just yet, in my opinion. Who's going to win this fight? I mean, I really want Lerone Murphy to go out there and win as a UK fighting fan, but I think Movsar Evloev is going to go out there and get a unanimous decision victory. I think he's just going to be able to take down Murphy too often, and he's not going to, be quite as reckless with the way that he's just, in range as that of Pico. And there'll be times on the feet where he might, get caught out and he might have to, take a couple shots, but then he'll just take him straight down to the ground and it will just, work. I don't think Lerone Murphy is, now a sudden real big power puncher. He can throw with intent and he can definitely hurt Evloev if he's, going too reckless with his attacks. But again, I think Evloev, he'll just be able to keep continuously taking him down and be happy with that, or pin him up against a cage and be able to have success and just grind out a win, which again might not be the most entertaining for the fans that want to see, exchanges and want to see all action type fights, but I just don't think it's going to be like that, and I think Evloev is going to go out there and get a decision. But again, I'll be rooting for Murphy for this fight. And then we can go on to fight next. I mean, it probably will be Volk, and it makes sense for it to be Volk. I mean, if not Yair Rodriguez, but again, Yair doesn't really deserve that fight. So, in my opinion, it will be Volk, and it should be Volk unless some sort of injury happens. But yeah, that is it for today's video. Hope you did enjoy. Like the video if you did indeed like the video, subscribe if you're new, and thanks for watching.